Hello everyone, and welcome to a guide or overview of Drazhoath, the Ashen of the Chaos Dwarfs. So I played through the initial turns and got a sense for the faction. These are my conclusions on how they play, their strengths and weaknesses. As always, not an in-depth guide or overview, but it should help you out making your own decisions. Now without further ado, let's play with Drazhoath, the Ashen. So for your short victory condition, you need to destroy the factions of Clan Rictus, or Tretch, it's really close by, and the Knights of Calador, Imric, located nearby as well. You also need to occupy, loot, razor, sack 35 different settlements. So this is particularly fast, actually, especially in eliminating the first two enemies. Should be quite fast, and then of course all you need is to get those settlements. Now, the short victory reward, of course, is that major relic missions become available, which is nice, and the workload requirements for raw materials, minus 50% all provinces, and the raw materials consumed per turn by buildings also decrease. Think of this as a growth economy buff overall. It's very thematic and allows better continuation, of course, into the long campaign. Now, long campaign, let's speak about it. It requires you to achieve the short victory, to occupy, loot, razor, sack 80 different settlements, to hold the settlement of Zar Nagrund, located here, and then to destroy Karasakarek or Thorgrim, Karakadrin or Ungrim, and the Grimgor's Artboys, or Grimgor, of course. So basically, this is a much lengthier campaign. It will, of course, force you to go into several different locations at once. You know, you have to expand over to this side, and you have to expand over to this side as well. That alone creates issues, but it's doable. It will take time, but still, just count on, you know, having dwarfs and greenskins for a long time as your major enemies. Now, you do get an interesting reward, which is 3 unique items. They're very good to ensure some nice buffs for your lords while you keep pursuing domination. And specific, some of these, for instance, will make you focus on different units in that specific army. So yeah, that's always cool. I love it. Now, in terms of our Lord Drazhoath, he's the Sentinel of Ashes, and all armaments cost minus 10% for unit capacity upgrades. So it implies that you'll be fielding better units overall during the course of the campaign, because you can, you know, get those unit caps really easily. And then armaments output is also plus 10%. So although this may not seem like a lot, but it does change in how the campaign works really well, in ensuring that you always get a little bit more tech, more high tech. That's the deal here with Drazhoath. Now, in terms of climates, no issue. No issue whatsoever. You can go anywhere. Everything is green. Everything is awesome. It's always cool when these factions show up. So one of the better factions actually to go for domination, as always, you know, with and especially considering even with the fact that they are chaos, it's good because they are a much better faction in terms of chaos, in terms of how balanced the army is. So yeah, I recommend this faction definitely to go for domination or even world completion. So your starting location is a 3-settlement province. That helps, but it's still quite in a precarious position because you're kind of surrounded by some legendary lords. So you gotta be aggressive in the expansion early on to try and secure a solid base. Typically it should be in the southern, so typical expansion should go into the southern areas, you know, try to control all this area before going into any mountain. You know, you have this big mountain range on the right and on the left, so just try to ensure that you control the plains before moving into either of those. It is also possible, of course, that you try to go into the north against your brethren, or even try to calm the Grimgor up really fast, but for the most part I would say that controlling the south would always be the better choice overall. So, in terms of diplomacy, you're Chaos Aligned. Really, so other Chaos factions, Norska, Warriors, Monogods, they should be at least neutral towards you. Now, given that you'll be fighting Greenskins and Dwarfs for the the most part of your campaign for sure. Skaven and ogres are likely to become friendly as well, because they'll be fighting those. So therefore, for the most part, you can get weapon steams from Skaven, like I mentioned here, and a variety of monstrous infantry from the ogres, maybe some missile units if you wish, but your army is already quite powerful. The Chaos Dwarfs are definitely one of the few armies that really have no weaknesses to be said. You know, most of the weaknesses are due to the tiers, the unit caps. So I would say just get anything that you will find fun, you know, to use in a combination with your already strong units. So let's delve into the mechanics. There's a lot of them. First, we have 3 unique settlement types. You have towers, which can only be built in the province capitals, factories, and outposts. These basically are tied to specific resources that you can get. There's 4 unique resources. So laborers, which you acquire via battles, convoys, you're required to give you raw materials. So each of these will give you the other basically. So raw materials are mainly produced via mines, which are in the outposts. Okay, so outposts give you mines that you can gain the raw materials from. That's basically it. And then these raw materials are used for armaments, so they're generated via the factory settlements and used mainly at the Hellforge for increasing unit caps or to improve your units. More on that in a moment. And then you have conclave influence, so you gain this via settlement buildings, and they're used to occupy seats at the Tower of Zar. Again, more on that later. So every different settlement type has its own building tree, really. So you should familiarize yourself with them in order to be certain of what you wish for a specific place. Now remember that most advanced units can only be built at the tower settlements, or the main provinces, of course. Now the labor economy is used to shift your laborers among your provinces to ensure that you're always at maximum efficiency. It will tell you how much labor you have and how much of the workload, and then you can shift them in accordance. Okay? In this one as well, let me mention this part. You have the labor actions, so as in you can sacrifice some laborers for instance, more conclave influence, more treasury, or more control, depending on whether or not you're requiring of those. So just remember that these labor actions, they're kind of like the Dark Elves or the Slaneshes. Can't remember the name, but they have the similar mechanic. So yeah, always remember that you have that, especially when you get a lot of laborers. Maybe you'll want some more conclave influence, so it's kind of like a trade-off. Okay. Now you don't have actually growth. The growth mechanic goes into different manners. So as in, what you're trying to get is ensuring that you always get laborers in order to grow up your provinces, because what you need here, as you can see, is just raw materials. That's about it. So buildings can require gold, as you can see there, it costs gold, or they can require armaments, or they can even require, like I told you there, raw materials. So it is always good that you have some, at least a little bit of an income on each of those resources. You have to plan that out. Now let's speak of military convoys. They're similar to Cathay caravans. So you send out a convoy to exchange with one currency for another, so you should check out what you are in need before proceeding. For instance, let me create a new convert here. It doesn't matter how much I have, and then you can see that if I go here, I'll trade armaments for some gold. Maybe that's what I want, so I will dispatch it, and it will have specific units. It will have events along the way, similar to how the Cathay caravans work. It's a very interesting mechanic here. Now let's talk about the Tower of Zar. This is basically the Confederation mechanic. I'll jump to the end, because after you reach here, you're able to confederate with specific ones, okay? But what this has, it has 4 levels. You unlock each one by unlocking at least one of these tiers, okay? And then you can use that conclave influence to gather these seats. Once these 4 are taken, you will get the full bonus that is over there, and thus you can grow into the better ones, the other tiers, etc. Now one thing is that you can steal from others. So basically you can actually try to steal and pay that to steal the seat from other factions. For instance, this one, they actually usurped this seat, so I lost that, you know, and Now I want revenge from that. So basically, that's the sort of idea. Plan wisely, so it matters as well. For instance, if you want the research rate, maybe you're going to concentrate here. Maybe you want more raw materials and armaments. Maybe you're going to concentrate here. That sort of idea. Okay. Now let's speak of the Hellforge. That's the last one that I want to talk. So it allows you to increase your unit caps for your better units, similar to how the Beastmen work. It also allows you to upgrade your units actually in the manufactory. They give them specific buffs. For instance, you can give them frenzy, you can give them sundering attacks, and this will cost something in upkeep, armaments in upkeep, depending on how many units you have from those. So it's a very neat way of getting, you know, better units. Maybe you can just really like Chaos Dwarf Warriors and you want to enhance them the best as you can. Well, you can give them all of that, but just pay armaments for sure. Now, one last idea here. Everyone is theory crafting regarding how many towers, how many outposts, and how many factories we really need to ensure that this is always growing. But the best way to do this is actually just to adapt. Just adapt to the current situation without thinking too much. Just remember that you'll need at least one of each, let's say, to ensure that you get some output of each. But if you want to build up a lot of raw materials in the beginning, or if you want to build up a lot of armament, it's up to you. Just ensure that you know what you're doing, that you have a purpose for that. That's my idea mainly when we're talking about these sort of mechanics. Just ensure that, well, I really want a lot of armaments to upgrade my units first. That sort of idea can work, and it can make it a different campaign that you would like the most, you know? So in terms of edicts, you have recruitment cost reduced and recruit rank for all units in the province. Of course, well, useful when you're recruiting. Then you have income from refinery buildings and more armaments output. Of course, this is a good reason to have in lots of factories so that you can engage with that. But basically, if you have only mines or only outposts, no need. Now you have the control +2 and chance of plague spreading reduced, which is always great to ensure that you don't have any problems with that. Mostly in the higher difficulties, that's where you may come up with some use for this. Not a lot of control, but at least it's better than nothing. And then you have the Masterful Architects. This basically is the default one that you should have. Rush construction labor cost and construction costs reduced. Yeah, that's always welcoming. One thing that I didn't spoke is that you actually can rush construction in the mechanics, so I forgot about that. My apologies. You can rush the construction by spending laborers to rush it. So if you're desperately in need of a specific building, by all means, just get those laborers to complete it. They'll do it just fine, without complaints, without anything. They'll just really do what you wish. Now, in terms of army stances, you have the underway. Basically, you've seen this before. It allows fast travel between difficult terrain. Just be wary of being intercepted, of course. Then you have in camp, enables replenishment and immunity to attrition, of course, which is always excellent. It does cost 50% movement range. Then the same thing, raiding. It does gain you labor, so be wary of that. Remember that. Okay, it costs 25% movement, or actually costs 50% to activate, and then you can't move that fast. Then you have ambush at 25%, and of course the typical force march. But always remember that this one also gives you labor. You may wish that. There's some tricks that you can do with this to ensure that you get a lot of laborers early on, but I'll leave you to finding out. In terms of buildings, it's a lengthy one. So there's a special building in your capital that gives income, raw materials and armaments, as well as recruitment for Chaos Dwarf units, which is always nice. You have 3 types of settlements: towers, outposts and factories. Let's begin with towers. This one. It's only in your province capitals that you can have. It's required for your advanced military buildings that also cost armaments. Notice, it always states there, it costs armaments. These ones cost raw materials. And these ones cost gold. That's basically it. You know, if it doesn't say anything there, it's because it costs gold. Okay? Now, in terms of the towers, the infrastructure, you get a Lord's recruit rank faction wide and Hero recruit rank faction wide, and as well as casualty replenishment rate. That's good. You also have a basic income building. Nothing else here, just more income. You have a control in adjacent provinces too, which is always excellent. It allows you to just have one maybe in the middle of some provinces, and it will be enough to keep them in order. Then you have raw materials consumed per turn by buildings minus 15%, which is always nice to have, especially because you'll be having some consumption. You have the conclave influence per turn, which is excellent. Especially you'll need these ones to quickly go into the confederation as well, so a couple of these definitely should be kind of like a priority. It also has some decent buffs, gives you more diplomatic relations with Chaos Dwarfs, and gives you some Winds of Magic, recruit rank for both centers. It's always nice. And of course, by all means, it's a tier 5 settlement, so it needs a tier 5 settlement, so it's going to take a while before you get it. Now, you also have... Oh, these are just the defensive ones, of course, but basically, you already know these ones. It's just garrison stuff, honestly. Now, let's go into the outposts first. So, the outposts are your main source of raw materials, as you can see there. Okay, raw materials, it will tell you how much workload you need, so you always need a lot of labor, but just ensure that you're always fighting or raiding to get a, a good amount of labor coming in. Now, it has only some basic hobgoblin units that you can recruit. It's still good. You can recruit some units, which is also always excellent. It's mainly about this, the raw materials, and required workload increase, more income, and income from post-battle loot, which is always great. And then you have a campaign line of sight and more control. It's maybe useful one or two, but really the other two are more valuable, really. So yeah. Then of course you may have some specific landmarks and stuff, such as this one. Just be sure that you're on the lookout for that. Now, the factories. They're the main source of converting raw materials into armaments. They have 3 military buildings, which go up to tier 3. And notice that it does have some infernal gods, which is really nice. And it does have some infernal castellan's abilities. So you can recruit some interesting units here in the factories as well. So even if you don't want the towers to go further into the military, even just one factory, one outpost can give you some significant military options as well. Now, raw materials spending for armaments, of course, as you can see there. Then we have raw materials for gold. If you need some income, definitely go for this. And it also gives you some chaos corruption, which is nice. You don't have a lot of those. And then you have more raw materials output. This is one of the reasons why people say that at least you should have one factory, so that you can get this raw materials output building, and of course the other 2 mines or 3 mines will benefit from that. So it's debatable whether it's better to get yet another outpost or one factory. I would say that a balance is always better. And yeah, in terms of the buildings, there we go. That's what you have. Remember that the costs range from gold, from raw materials and armament, so you always need to keep an eye on both. Now, the research is really cool. It's really cool. It's divided into 3: military, sorcery, and industry. So basically, industry, it says it does what it says. It's good to enhance how your economy works. It's good to get more output. It's good to get less construction costs, as you can see there. So yeah. Basically, if you want to have a better infrastructure and economy, go here. Sorcery not only gives you a little bit of basic stuff in the campaign, as you can see there, less chance of a plague spreading. Great. But it also enjoys some diplomatic relations with other armies. So make sure that you keep an eye on these. Maybe you'll want for those. And of course, it does affect sorcery. It does affect some spells for all characters. So yeah, keep an eye on these. Check that out to ensure that you are aware of the advantages. Then of course you have the basic military. These are where you get the buffs for the specific units, and also some specific improvements like upkeep here, for instance, casual replenishment rate. So yeah, always be mindful that sometimes it does require some armaments or some conclave points or some raw materials. Just be sure that you check it before you go for it, otherwise you may be needing those resources somewhere else and you didn't realize. But it's definitely one of the best, more themed like technology trees. Everyone loved it when they saw it, so yeah, it's definitely a really good one. So as always, you have your lord specific skills, the yellow line as well, or the caster line. Basically this one has both. Then we have the red line or army abilities or skills, and then you have the campaign or blue line as it's called. Let's start with the blue line. As you can see, we do have replenishment rate and less attrition, which is really cool. Given how Chaos Dwarfs have nearly no issues with climate, this may be redundant if you wish, so you may want to skip it. I always like to have it. It's basically a no-brainer for me, but of course you may play in a different way. Now they also have income from post-battle loot and labor from post-battle, which for me it's a no-brainer. You'll always need laborers. They're very helpful, very thematic, so by all means getting this. It's just 3 skill points, so it shouldn't affect too much. Now red line is quite good, mainly because it affects both the early type units and the light, low and high quality troops of the same type. So this helps that you can use it early and still benefit later from that choice. So for example, you can get this one for Chaos Dwarf units as well as their elite units, the Infernal Ironstone. So yeah, that's the sort of idea that I always liked. And they always have, you know, you can spend just like 3 on them, you know, basically you'll get a 15 skill point, you'll see later on, that will allow you to have, you know, a good balanced out army. So it's really cool. I really like it. Just it also has one good thing. It grants good buffs, actually. It grants, you know, melee attack, which you kind of lack, so it corrects most of your weaknesses and also complements the strength of the army. So I really like it. It's really cool. So and here we have the redline skills for the Chaos Dwarfs. Now one note, nearly all of their unit types have amazing success in battle, so especially with all the mechanics that you have, so you can field quite a variety of different armies, focus on artillery, range, just the melee powerhouse, combinations of both. It's really up to you. They're really great for, you know, for a fun campaign where you don't have to pay too much attention to this and just go and play and have fun. So Drazhoath, he has bonuses for Kadai units as well as infantry units, Infernal God and Iron Sword. So of course some combinations of those are in order. You know, I brought in, for instance, a solid infantry unit with the Kadai units on the flanks with some ranged power to assist, or maybe you'll want, instead of that range, maybe you'll want just some artillery while you still use the same idea. I brought in a Lamassu just to remember myself to explain. So the Lamassu has a magical ability that denies magical attacks from enemies, negates magical attacks from enemies. So they're really cool to pair up with the Kadai units, because the Kadai units have a lot of physical resistance, especially in the late game, and they also gain a little bit from him. So it's always a good combo. You know, you send the Lamassu and the Fireborn really close to him because it doesn't have a lot of area, but it will allow any magical attacks to be, you know, denied. So in case the enemy brought in some unit with magical attacks, well, it's denied, it's cancelled out, which is really cool. Of course, nothing wrong for you to go with just some artillery units and just some bull centers, just some infantry there as well with the Kadai. This is more, let's say, of an ambush style battle, but you can also use the magma cannons to push the enemy into your front lines, and then you can wreck them indefinitely with that army. But there's tons of different combinations, especially with the Chaos Dwarfs. They're really cool. So as you can see, more possibilities like a more dwarf style, you know, artillery, ranged units with some good old infantry to cover in at the front, or you can have just some basic with flanks, you know, some bull centers on the flanks with the basic infantry units and some ranged units. Then you can also have some Lamassu, of course, and some Kadai units with the cavalry as well, to more of a stronger flank. Possibly, I would definitely use the Kadai Fireborn in conjunction with the infantry, for instance. So that's the sort of idea. Note that I always have like a placeholder melee character and a placeholder caster in the army, but by all means combinations are in order. I just always like to recommend that you at least bring one of each. Bring some magic, bring some melee hero. It would always be a good addition to your forces. Then of course notice how difficult it is to bring something of everything. Bringing artillery, bringing in cavalry units, bringing in ranged infantry and close melee infantry. That costs a lot in terms of redline skills. So that's the point that I wanted to do with this army here. Just remember, you can bring it, just note the cost in terms of redline skills. Then because you have the unit caps, always remember that you'll definitely have some weaker armies going around. I'd like to call them sweeper armies. You know, those that are necessarily not going to fight the most elite enemies, but they'll defend in conjunction with garrisons. They'll be a secondary army to attack the most elite enemies, that sort of idea. For instance, the Hobgoblin army, it's definitely possible, especially with an Overseer. I actually have it the different way with a Sorcerer there, but yeah, with an Overseer they're really good because they have some skills to assist them, and especially with the unique Goblin hero that you can get. He buffs them tremendously, so suddenly this army actually packs a punch. But yeah, it's quite cheap as well, so that's the main idea. You can build it everywhere. So yeah, a sweeper army, something to deal with the enemy's weaker armies as well. It's always good to have. And then once more, just to explain that if you focus too much on different types of units, of course you're going to have to pay in terms of red line skills. That's why I like to have this idea to ensure that you always realize, okay, artillery or missiles or frontline or monster units, but you can't have both really easily. So yeah, just always you can, but not buffing them on the red lines without spending a lot of skill points. That's the main idea. But yeah, just have fun with it. It's definitely one of the rosters that you're going to be able to field lots of varied units. So yeah, it's a good recommendation of a DLC, for instance, for anyone. So in terms of final notes, it's definitely such a good race to play. Drazhoath actually changes focus a bit into more the southern areas, contrary to Ostrogoth, which was in the north. And it actually becomes quite unique because of the enemies that you're going to be fighting. You're definitely going to be fighting dwarves and greenskins, that's for sure, but you'll still be fighting, you know, Nurgle, for instance, or the Vampire Counts here. Maybe you'll want to go into Cathay further. So that's sort of a nice idea that you can have, and definitely the proximity with the sea. Maybe you'll want to go there, maybe you'll want to just rampage across the coast. It's up to you, really. But that's the principle here. It does have a little bit more options in terms of how you expand, rather than with Ostrogoth. Now, he focuses a bit on the Kadai units as well, which is a bit interesting. I encourage you to go with it. You know, they're quite cool units as well. So it's decent to go instead of just with the Bull Center Frenzy, for instance, from Ostrogoth. So yeah, your army always consists of strong holding infantry, great missiles and artillery, great cavalry, good monstrous infantry, great single entities and flyers. They do lack some speed and they require time to build up, and especially lots of resources. So that's the main key point here with the tiers. It may take time for you to actually get a full stack of just dwarves. Replenishment is great. No issues with climate, and most lords have good access to replenishment. There's no hero with replenishment, but it's not like it's really necessary at all. So let's play then with Drazhoath, the Ashen.